Captain Liam Harper stood on the bridge of the Seraphim, staring out into the cold emptiness of space. The star systems beyond glowed faintly, but the ship was far from the nearest planets in a region of space uncharted by most races. The crew of the Seraphim had been exploring this area for weeks, collecting data on the stars and planets that made up this mysterious section of the galaxy. The mission had been routine, just another day in the life of deep space exploration. However, something had changed. The first sign came when Lieutenant Maya Dawson, the communications officer, found an odd transmission. It wasn't much at first, a weak signal coming through a secondary frequency that wasn't typically used for standard communication. Maya's eyes narrowed in focus as she listened to the eerie hum of static that filled the air. It was faint, but there was something in the rhythm, something that didn't feel right. She tried to clean up the signal. "I've got something, Captain," Maya said, her voice cutting through the silence of the bridge. Captain Harper turned around, his usual calm expression replaced with a hint of curiosity. "What is it?" "It's an SOS, a distress call," she replied, tapping at the console in front of her. "But this is strange. It's not coming from any of the systems we've mapped. The signal's coming from somewhere deeper in the sector." Harper walked over and looked at the transmission on her screen. The signal was garbled, but there was no mistaking the desperation in the voice that came through. "We're under attack. They've taken the colonies. Help us, please. If anyone is listening..." The voice broke off, replaced by a horrible screech of static as if the speaker had been cut off mid-sentence. There was silence for a moment. "Do you have any more information?" Harper asked, turning to Maya. "It's hard to tell," she said, adjusting the receiver. "But from what I can make out, this is coming from the planet Zentha 7. It's a newly established colony, settled only a few years ago by the Alliance. They might be in trouble." Harper frowned. He knew about the planet. It was part of a new wave of peaceful colonization efforts in the galaxy, an expansion meant to offer safe havens for peaceful races. The planet was still in its early stages, its colonies barely established. "Have you verified the source?" he asked, looking at Maya. "I'm working on it, but I think it's authentic, Captain." "This is real," Maya said, her voice tinged with concern. Harper crossed his arms. He knew what they had to do. A distress call from a colony was a call for help, and the crew of the Seraphim had never turned their back on anyone in need. The Alliance, the peaceful spacefaring races they belonged to, prided themselves on helping one another. The Seraphim was a research vessel, yes, but it had combat training as well. It was built for exploration and for peacekeeping, and if a colony was in trouble, it was their job to help. "Set a course for Zentha 7, let's see if we can help them," Harper ordered. "Get the ship ready for travel, everyone. I want us moving in 10 minutes. The crew quickly began preparing for departure. While the rest of the officers and crew worked, Maya remained at her station, still trying to filter the transmission for any more details. Harper glanced at her once more before walking to his seat. He trusted his officers, but there was something about this SOS that made him uneasy. It wasn't just the desperation in the voice, it was the way the message had been sent. It felt strange, like it was almost too forced, too urgent. As the ship moved into hyperspace, Harper stood in the silence of the bridge, his mind racing. He hoped it was just his instincts acting up. He hoped the distress was just a misunderstanding, some minor setback on the planet that could easily be fixed. But deep down, a small part of him feared something worse. The trip to Zentha 7 felt longer than it should. The usual hum of the Seraphim's engines provided a constant backdrop as they flew through the galaxy at faster than light speeds, but it did nothing to ease the crew's growing tension. As they neared the planet, Maya's communications systems began to experience static interference, and the distant urgent SOS had faded into silence. Then, the planet itself appeared in view. Zentha 7 looked like a normal planet at first, lush, green, with large oceans and sprawling cities visible from orbit. But there was something unsettling about it. No ships flew in orbit, no signals came from the surface. It felt empty. Too empty. Harper ordered the ship to enter a low orbit, and he stared at the planet below, his brow furrowed. "What are we looking at here, Captain?" Commander Ronan Zane, the tactical officer, asked as he walked onto the bridge. "I'm not sure, but something isn't right," Harper replied, his gaze never leaving the planet below. The crew was now silent, each of them sensing the same unease. The cities on the surface, once brimming with life, were now abandoned, lifeless. The signs of a thriving colony seemed to be nothing more than abandoned ruins. Then, the sensors began to pick up something strange. In a nearby asteroid field, several ships appeared on the radar. They were massive and built for war, with sleek angular designs that hinted at technology far more advanced and deadly than anything the Seraphim had seen. "They're here," Maya whispered. Her voice trembled as she tracked the ship's movements. "They're coming toward us," Ronan said grimly. Harper stood up, his eyes narrowing. "Get us out of here, now!" But it was too late. The ships in the distance began to power up, and the Seraphim's sensors were flooded with strange signals. The fleet, which had been hidden in the asteroid belt, began moving towards them with alarming speed. A single message came through, clear and chilling. "You shouldn't have come here." Captain Harper's heart sank as the reality of the situation hit him. This wasn't a peaceful call for help. They had walked right into a trap. The Deathworlders had arrived. The tension in the bridge was palpable as the massive fleet of Deathworlders moved closer. The Seraphim was vastly outgunned. Their ship was meant for exploration, not combat, and the enemy fleet was nothing short of terrifying. These Deathworlders were known for their brutal methods of war, their ships designed for utter destruction, and now, Captain Liam Harper's crew was caught in their crosshairs. The message that had once seemed like a simple distress call now felt like a deadly trap. Harper stood at the helm, staring at the enemy ships. His mind raced. They needed to find a way out, something to turn the tide before it was too late. "Captain, we've got incoming." Lieutenant Maya Dawson's voice broke the silence, her tone sharp and clear. "Their ships are powering up weapons." "They're not coming to talk." Harper clenched his fists. He knew they didn't have the firepower to face these ships head-on. The Deathworlders' vessels were massive and heavily armed, unlike anything the Seraphim had encountered before. The Seraphim had one advantage: they were fast, able to maneuver quickly, but that wouldn't be enough. "Ronan, get me options," Harper said, turning to his tactical officer. "What can we do?" Commander Ronan Zane studied the readouts on the tactical screen. "We can't outrun them for long, and I don't think we can outfight them either, but we can try to confuse their targeting systems. There's an asteroid belt up ahead. If we fly through it, they might lose us in the debris." Harper didn't hesitate. "Set a course." Full speed ahead. As the Seraphim accelerated toward the asteroid field, the crew braced for what would come next. The ship shuddered as it entered the dense field, dodging large chunks of rock and debris. The Deathworlder ships followed, but the cloud of asteroids created enough interference that their tracking systems were beginning to malfunction. The Seraphim zigzagged between the asteroids, avoiding the enemy ship's laser blasts. For a brief moment, they managed to gain some distance, but they weren't safe yet. The Deathworlders were relentless, and they had the technology to track their movements even through the field. "We're not going to shake them for long," Ronan said, his voice grim. "They're adapting too fast. They'll find us." Harper knew Ronan was right. The clock was ticking. They needed help fast. The Seraphim could only survive so long under this kind of pressure. But there was still hope. The ship's long-range communication system had a narrow band signal that could reach the nearest Alliance fleet, if they could make it work under the constant barrage of interference. "Maya, can you get a signal out to our allies?" Harper asked, his voice tight with urgency. Maya's fingers flew over the console, trying to bypass the interference. "I'm working on it. But the Deathworlders are jamming every frequency I try. It's like they know exactly what we're doing." Harper cursed under his breath. They couldn't wait much longer. They were running out of options. Then, just as all seemed lost, a faint signal crackled through the communication system. It was weak, but it was something. Maya's eyes widened. "I've got something. It's an encrypted message," she said, tapping the screen to bring it up. "It's from a familiar frequency." She didn't finish the sentence. Before her could react, the ship was rocked by a sudden explosion. The bridge lights flickered and alarms blared through the Seraphim as the shields took the brunt of the blast. "What was that?" Ronan shouted, steadying himself against the console. "We've been hit," Maya replied, her voice shaking. "Their main weapons just breached our shields. We're losing power in the aft section." Harper cursed again. They didn't have time for this. He turned to his crew, his face hardening. "We need to take control of this ship now." "Captain," Maya said, her voice now steady with resolve. "The message, it's from the Alliance. They've gotten our signal. We're not alone." Harper felt a rush of hope. They hadn't given up yet. "Can you get a full message through to them?" "I'll try, Captain. It's going to be tight," Maya replied. Harper turned to Ronan. "Get the engines back online. We're going to need everything we have to stay in the game." As the crew worked frantically, the battle outside continued. The Deathworlders were relentless, their ships closing in on them. But there was something else. Something Harper hadn't seen yet. The faint signal from the Alliance grew stronger. It wasn't just a message. It was a fleet, a massive battalion of ships from the Alliance arriving just in time. They were still a few light years out, but they would be able to respond soon. "Maya, can you send out a distress signal to them now?" Harper barked. "I'm on it," Maya said, her fingers flying over the controls. "Sending the coordinates now. They'll know exactly where we are." Then came the unexpected. Just as the Deathworlder fleet moved in for the kill, a barrage of fire erupted from behind them. Harper's heart jumped. The Alliance fleet had arrived. The enemy ships, caught off guard, tried to counterattack, but the Alliance fleet was prepared for battle. The Deathworlders' ships were formidable, but the Alliance was no slouch in a fight. A series of massive explosions lit up the void as the Alliance fleet's heavy artillery tore into the Deathworlders' ships. The Seraphim watched, helpless but hopeful, as the tide of the battle shifted. Harper knew that the fight wasn't over, but they were no longer alone. The odds had changed. Now it was a fight for survival, not just for the crew of the Seraphim, but for the entire galaxy. But as the Alliance fleet engaged the Deathworlders, a nagging thought remained in Harper's mind. This wasn't just a random attack. The Deathworlders had been waiting for them, and their fleet was more prepared than anyone could have imagined. The question lingered. Why had they come for them? The battle raged on, but Captain Harper knew that the answer would come soon. The universe had just been reminded of the deadly forces lurking in its darkest corners, and no one would be safe until the Deathworlders had been stopped once and for all.